Saudi Arabia has been re-elected as a member of the United Nations Human Rights Council despite its gross record of rights violations. Saudi Arabia won one of the 4 seats reserved for the Asia-Pacific region in the council. The election comes as the kingdom is under fierce criticism from rights groups across the world for its war in Yemen. Thousands of Yemenis, most of them civilians, have lost their lives in the Saudi attacks on Yemen since last year. Meanwhile, Russia was beaten out by Hungary and Croatia following lobbying by certain groups. The protesting groups are angry with Russia's fight against terrorists in Syria. Max Igan is a radio host and political commentator joining us from Brisbane. So I'm wondering what the process is in terms of the details coming on in the paper when they make these decisions at the UN. If they look at a kingdom like Saudi Arabia, do they see the fact that they've killed maybe civilians, women, children, that they're bombing agricultural fields, trying to starve them to death by some accounts, and then they say, no, it's okay, they can be re-elected?
Well, that seems to be the process that they go through. I mean, a lot of it, I think, is to just legitimize what Saudi Arabia is getting away with in Yemen, and to just fly it in the face of the West and to fly it in the face of people who are trying to stand up against these sort of atrocities. Again, you see Russia was voted out because they've attempted to squash the terrorists and Daesh in Syria. So it's just the United Nations, doing what it can to show its true colours at every opportunity. The United Nations is anything but what it pretends to be. It's supposed to be there as some sort of a regulating body that's going to go in and patrol the world and make sure that these human rights violations don't occur. But we see it promoting these types of human rights violations. It's really just a united dictatorship, really, run by a very few nations who have the power of veto, who seem to use the United Nations as a bit of a puppet show to just demonstrate to nations who want to stand up against them what they're willing to let them get away with. I mean, the appointment of this is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, there's very few nations that have more human rights abuses than we see from Saudi Arabia, and it's absolutely ridiculous that they should be appointed the head of human rights or even on the council at all. But again, it's just a flight in the face of the people, and let the world know that they really have control and they're going to do what they want to do and how they want to do it.
Well, I wish I was more prepared to maybe give you some kind of data on how much Saudi Arabia, how much money it contributes to the UN, because there's no other reason to logically think why it is the UN would actually re-elect Saudi Arabia, a regime known for a different variety of abuses that take place, one form or another, because it actually takes away from the legitimacy of the UN itself when it commits acts like this, like the re-election of Saudi Arabia. Do you think it's a matter of money that Saudi Arabia perhaps contributes to the UN, that the UN is afraid to not re-elect them?
Well, I think that's a lot of it, and also there's the alliances you see with Saudi Arabia. It's allied itself with a lot of very powerful nations like the United States and Israel, and these are all very, very strong forces in the United Nations. But yeah, I think money has a lot to do with it. But again, I mean, it's an absolutely ridiculous concept that Saudi Arabia should be even on this council. I mean, here is a monarchy, a brutal dictatorship that cuts off hands, cuts off heads left, right and centre, cuts off more heads than ISIS, and is supporting all sorts of terrorist activities, funneling weapons and all sorts of stuff into Syria, carrying out massive atrocities in Yemen, and again, we just see it open slather for this nation. So yeah, money's probably got a lot to do with it, but again, it's the nations that this country has allied itself with as well. You see there's some very, very powerful forces that control the United Nations. The United Nations is just there to give the world the idea that there is this regulating body there, but really it's just a massive part of the control system.
Thank you. Max Igan, radio host and political commentator.